Good afternoon and welcome to After Hours. I'm joining Bill Jamieson at his studio and his open house of Anthony Jamieson Designs. Welcome. And I wasn't sure whether to call you a glass artist. Is that what you call the work you do?
Yeah, I would describe it as art. All the work that we do is custom designed, one-of-a-kind pieces. But it is an architectural process that we are creating, an architectural product that we're creating. Every project begins with a blank piece of paper, and it's a collaborative process with our clients. So rather than being, say, a landscape painter and painting a series of landscape paintings and then putting them in a gallery and hoping that the right person comes in who responds to the work and buys it, we actively work with clients to design the work that the clients want in their home. So it's a bit more of a, you have to be able to master a variety of different artistic styles to be able to create work for clients with different desires or wants.
Well, one of the things that stood out to me in your, you have to be a great drawer, for one thing. You know, seeing the pieces of paper and the light table, I thought, oh, you have to be a really good artist.
Yeah, you have to have a foundation in art. I come from this, I've always been interested in art, took art all the way through elementary school and high school, but you know, my thought at that point was I was going into a military career. Art was something I loved to do, but it wasn't something I'd ever thought would be a vocation. You know, it was just something that I did. My apprentice always knew she was going to be an artist as well, and so she went and took fine arts at Fanshawe College in London, Ontario, and then got her BFA at Nova Scotia School of Crafts and Design. I got my training at Sheridan College in Oakville, Ontario. Has a whole, it's a crafts and design college, but it has all the foundational skills, art history, drawing, all of that as well. But yeah, you have to understand proportion and form and you know, all of that sort of thing.
So how would you describe yourself as a child? And what was your family life like and important influences in that?
I grew up in West Vancouver. My grandparents were a huge part of my life. They lived in West Vancouver as well. I had a pretty normal, you know, white guy, you know, childhood in a basically white community. Its history is in West Vancouver is kind of not terribly progressive, I guess. You know, there were all sorts of exclusion policies in place, but you know, so I had all of my peers were basically white. A couple of Chinese kids when I was in grade 7, one South Asian kid. I had a black, you know, science teacher in school, but everybody else was white. And grew up really feeling, recognizing now, quite privileged in that kind of childhood. My grandparents built a 35-foot cabin cruiser in their front yard in West Vancouver, and I spent most of my childhood growing up on that, cruising around the islands of the Salish Sea. Fascinated by the ocean, always loved the ocean. Would sit as a kid, I'd catch sea stars and tie strings to them and put my face mask on, and I would drop my sea star down to the bottom and let my sea star catch things and bring them back up to the surface.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
actually.
It was really, really fun. Avid snorkeler, learned how to scuba dive, spend most of my time in or around the water. So the ocean is really important to me. And the other thing that I remember was my grandmother had a collection of cut crystal, and just being absolutely mesmerized by the way the light would be captured in the crystal. And you know, church windows were always something that fascinated me. It was the play of light. The play of light on the water, play of light under the water, you know, the way the light goes through the forest.
Because that's what your work is doing now.
Yeah, yeah. I sometimes think that I have a very mild form of autism, you know, where I can become completely lost, just absolutely lost in color and light and the way light moves. It constantly arrests me. You know, growing up was an adventure. You know, we were we camped a lot. We were out on the boat all the time, and so that was
a nice life. It sounds
it was a very nice life. Yeah, yeah.
You've also done community work. Did you live in Mount Pleasant, and is that how you got involved in the community work there?
Yeah, I also come from a family that believes in volunteerism. So, you know, my dad was a cub leader, and my mom was a brownie leader, and they were both lions. And so, you know, being involved in the community has always been important to me. And when I was living in Mount Pleasant, I became involved with the local credit union, a very small credit union, and so I was on the board of that. And I got involved in the Citizens Planning Committee for the redevelopment of the official community plan for Mount Pleasant. And I spent 5 years of my life chairing that committee as we reworked all of the urban planning schedules for Mount Pleasant.
So when you say that, are you talking about, like, I think of the community garden?
That was
part of it?
Well, that was an initiative of members of the community, but this would have been things like, you know, rewriting the planning schedules to allow for artist live-work studios and lofts, recognizing the heritage, you know, history of Mount Pleasant and all of the heritage homes, and working to create incentives to either maintain those or to design and build new that matched that, rather than trying to chop up, you know, the integrity of the community. So all of that sort of stuff. And we also worked with the social planning department in the city of Vancouver, so there were social issues that were being addressed as well.
I want to talk about now more directly about the work you do. Part of what I find fascinating about what you do, well, never mind the beauty of it and all that, but we'll go through all that, is now correct me if I'm wrong. Well, first of all, that you use sand to form glass. And isn't glass sand as well?
Yeah, glass is made primarily of sand. But I'm not making glass. What I'm doing is I am creating patterns, forms, and molds to melt already fabricated glass, architectural glass, into those forms or shapes. And so the sand that's in my kiln is the base. It's like my my substrate that everything sits on, and I can shape and pattern the sand. But I also work with other materials that I create molds with, and then I lay the sheet of glass on top of that, heat it, and let the gravity and heat allow the glasses to slump down and take on all that detail.
And talk a bit about, you mentioned, or maybe I mentioned it, but your light table, how important that is in terms of the work you do.
Sure. In the studio we have a 4-foot by 8-foot table with LED lights underneath it. It's a diffusing table, so the light is constant all the way across it. And we use that a lot when we're doing our drawings. You know, it gives us a nice, stable, flat easel, basically, to do all our drawings on. But where it really comes in handy is when you're carving the mold material. And you do that with the light on. As you're removing the fiber, you're seeing the different densities that you've created in carving the material. And so it gives you a good idea of what is going to show up on the glass when the glass is melted on that mold material.
Okay.
So it's integral to the work we do. Yeah.
There's a lot of detail, like technical detail in what you do. Where did you learn to do it?
Yeah, glass is one of those really interesting mediums as an artist, because you have to use both sides of your brain. You have to understand the physics and the chemistry and the mechanics of working with glass, as well as working on the artistic side of your brain to create the artwork. So I started my journey in glass in about 1991 when I came to Main Island, and I sort of coerced my business partner into taking me on as his apprentice. And at that point we were doing decorative glass. We were making vases and candle holders and plateware and fused art pieces. And that sustained us. That was our full-time occupation for 15 years anyway. We would travel across North America, doing shows, selling our work. In 2006, I took a workshop at Pilchuk. Now, Pilchuk is a rather special place for glass artists. It's up in the mountains in a tree farm license owned by Weyerhaeuser, halfway between Vancouver and Seattle. And it was started 40 years ago, I believe now, by Dale Chihuly and a number of other glass artists and aficionados of glass. And it was quite a camp. It was just go out into the woods and play. And they had
cool.
temporary furnaces for glass blowing and things like that. And it really was kind of rough and tumble, and it's really established now into an international facility where students and instructors come from all over the world, and they have 14 to 17 day intensive workshops. And I've been privileged to have been there a number of times, both as a student and as a teaching assistant. And so I took a workshop in 2006 with my mentor, who's from Australia, and I learned these techniques. And I was really excited because at that time our glass business with the decorative glass was starting to wind down. We were finding our sales were starting to slow down. People weren't as interested in buying the product. Younger people weren't interested in what we were doing. But I have a construction background as well. So I spent 15 years with my own construction company in West Vancouver. And I could see the application of what I had learned in the workshop at Pilchuk and how that could be applied in people's homes. And so people were saying to me all the time, I love your work, but I have no room. I have no space any longer. And I could see, people would have side lights beside their front door that had mini blinds that never got opened. And if they did get opened, they were filled with dead spiders and dead flies and things like that. And I thought, well, there's a perfect location. You get privacy, you get brilliance, you get
beauty,
creative.
and yeah.
So we came back from that experience in 2006 thinking that this would be perfect, a perfect transition. And we worked really hard that season to get ready for the Christmas season. And we created a large volume of glass for the 2008 Christmas season.
And then lo and behold?
Lo and behold, there was the crash. The economic recession came, and we had $150,000 worth of glass and nobody wanted to buy it. So it took a couple of extra years to make the transition to doing the architectural glass, and I'm really glad we did. So during that period of time, we were kind of trying to do both, and finally it was like, you have to focus on one thing. So we spent that period of time sort of building our portfolio and,
making mistakes.
Oh, absolutely.
Learning.
But that's the whole thing, that's part of the other side of the brain. The artist side of your brain knows exactly what you want to create and what it's going to look like, but the mechanical side of your brain has to figure out how to do that.
Make it happen.
Make it happen, and why didn't it work, and what can I do to make it work the next time? And so a lot of the techniques that we've developed have come from failures. Yeah. When I was at art school, one of my favorite phrases that one of my fellow students had, she was a Japanese exchange student, and her favorite expression was, break is good. So you break something, you have to look at it with new eyes. You have to be able to hold on to what it is that you want to do lightly. So if you hold on too tightly, it's going to break. And if you're too engaged or have too strong a commitment to what it is that you think you're trying to achieve, you're often so frustrated that you miss the opportunities that come when something
by
does
accident.
Go wrong. Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of it's by exploration and experimentation. And somebody says, "Can you do this?" And you go, "Well, I've never done that before, but I'm sure we can figure out a way to do it." Absolutely. Yeah.
When I think of kilns, I think of flames, fire. Tell me about your kilns.
Okay, so flames and fire is more furnace, right?
Right.
So that's what happens when you're doing glass blowing, and you have basically a furnace with flames heating up that molten massive glass. We're working in a kiln which has electric elements, and the difference is in a ceramic kiln, you want your elements to be running around as your kiln is rising up. So your elements are running around the sides, right? So the heat is even throughout the layers of kiln shelves that you're putting in. So your clay is evenly heated that way. With glass, you can't really do that. You want, with the type of glass we do, you want your elements all to be in the roof of your kiln, broadcasting down.
So it goes into the sand form as well.
Exactly.
Right.
But this is part of the mechanical side of glass. Glass needs to be evenly heated, or at least the type of glass we work with, soda lime glass, needs to be evenly heated. Otherwise it'll break. It's called thermal shock. So if one side is cold, one side's hot,
Gotcha.
it doesn't like that, right? Especially when it's cooled down. So, we designed our kiln ourselves, we built it ourselves, and we've tweaked it as we've gone along so that, we understand our kiln and we understand how it works with our glass, the glass we work with.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, I saw a documentary about sand, but the sand was being used for concrete, for buildings. I think we're losing sand, and it's being dug up. Are you particular about the sand you use? Do you know where it comes from or anything?
My sand is mined in Washington State.
Oh, okay.
It's graded and cleaned and sifted and all the rest of it. It's a very specialized type of sand that I use. It's far too valuable as the product that it is to be used in concrete.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but that's the big problem, and of course the big problem with the degradation of sand, especially on beaches and things like that, is it's a throwaway technology or mindset. Okay, 10 years later, let's jackhammer up all the concrete that we poured and throw it into a landfill, and now we have to find more sand.
Yeah.
So that is certainly an issue, but I can. In our processes, we use the same sand again and again and again. We can use the same sand for 10, 20 years. So it's not like we're having, we will lose a certain amount of it in the process, and I have to top it up. But, basically that sand, I just reuse it again and again. I don't have to replace it.
Have you used color much in your glass?
That's interesting, because I told you about my love of color, getting lost in color in cathedral windows and the colors created with the prismatic effects of cut crystal and things like that. But as I got older, and we used to use a lot of color in the studio. As I got older, I became more and more captivated with just the play of light. The way light would change things and how the piece would feel without color as the light would change across it. So most of our work has evolved to just use the glass. And the glass we use is architectural float window glass. So it's got an iron content in it. It has that green cast that you see when you look at the edge of a coffee table or somebody's fancy shower. You know, you'll look at the edge of the glass and you'll see it's green. So that's most of what we use. That being said, recently more clients have been looking for application of color as details within the overall piece. And so we're starting to use custom art glass that we're cutting and shaping and gluing into our cast piece for details using optically clear epoxies. That has to happen after the glass is tempered. So all the glass we create, we temper for safety purposes.
So when you're using the color, do you heat it as well, or is it something that happens after?
No, it's all handmade, often hand-rolled art glass, and so there's a variety of thicknesses and color plays of lighting and color and things like that within every sheet. And so what I'll do is I'll look at the design, and then I'll tend to buy full sheets of glass so that I can try to select flows or movements of color within the piece for the particular application. And then I'll make a paper template of what I need to do, trace that out onto the glass, cut it, and grind it and polish it, and then glue it in place.
Do you ever feel sometimes like it's a lot of process? Do you ever feel sometimes like it's work? Or is it a pleasure all the time, sort of sitting as part of it?
Yeah, no, I've never felt like it's not a pleasure.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah,
nice.
I feel like, I've worked at jobs where I have not felt that I was enjoying myself.
You can say it,
No, I didn't hate it, but it wasn't what I really wanted to do. And I think most of us go through struggles in our lives. Emotional struggles. Times when we feel very unhappy, depressed. Life was pretty bleak especially when I was in my early 30s. It was really bleak, and I determined for myself at that point that I wanted a happy life. And so I started to imagine what that happy life would look like. And I feel like I have created that happy life for myself. So, I spend almost all of my time in a state of joy. And
oh, you're so lucky, my dear.
It's hard work. It's not luck. It is hard work. But you have to, this is my personal philosophy. So,
okay.
I'm not trying to preach. But
no.
For myself, I had to learn how to be happy. I had to learn how to appreciate the moments that are in front of you. And there's been tragedy in my life as well that has taught me that you don't know when the end of your life is going to be. You don't know what your future holds. True. So, you can't wait. You have to live your life. And so I chose to make my life a happy life. And part of that is service, so I'm on our fire department here on Main Island. I believe in doing everything I can to make my community a healthy, caring place. And I try to embrace that in my life. To answer your question, go back to, is it work? Well, of course it's work. But it's work I enjoy. And the nicest thing about it is I don't have to deal with people who don't get what I do. I don't have to try to convince somebody that what I'm doing, they need. People either get what we do or they don't get what we do. And if they get what we do, then we build relationships with those people. And the process can take up to a year from the beginning to the end, with lots of engagement back and forth. And a lot of those clients that we work with have reputations of being really difficult people. Really,
and you change that?
No, we established the relationship from the very beginning. We set up the communication so that they understand how we operate, what they can expect from us, how we're going to engage with them. Anything goes sideways, we let them know immediately. You know, we understand about working to schedules. Having had a construction company for years, I know how one thing leads to the next thing, and how you have to, everything has to mesh for a project to move forward properly. So, you know, that's where we start from. And I can honestly tell you that in the years that we have been doing this work, we have not had one difficult client. We haven't had one unpleasant situation. We haven't had one, you know, project that I wished we hadn't taken on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
that's great.
It really is. It really is. But I think it all stems from, you know, not trying to push what we do on people who don't get what we do.
Do you ever have a hard time letting certain pieces go to that person?
Never.
Oh, interesting.
Never. I am so happy. I mean, and it's funny because we document the work as we go along. Like every project, we're photographing and we're sending photographs along as we go. And I describe after we've done all the work, because I mean, this is boring work for most people, right? They imagine glass, and they imagine going to a glass blowing studio and all the theatrics involved in blowing glass. You know, there's a certain aspect to that I really get. But our work is painstakingly slow, methodical. Yeah. It requires a lot of patience. You can't hurry it. And so people come and say, I'd love to see you working. And it's like, okay, you come and see me working. And
it's not
about
quite
5 minutes, not what you expect. But what I tell clients is, you know, once everything is done, the mold is in the kiln, it's fired, the glass is on, the glass is cast onto the mold. The morning you open the kiln, it's like Christmas morning. Oh, every single time. You don't know how it's going to look until you open the kiln. You imagine what it's going to look like, but you don't really know until you're opening the kiln. And then you open the kiln, and it literally is like Christmas morning every single time. Wow. And you want to share that with the client, right? So no, I don't ever feel that I have the desire to keep pieces back. Occasionally, I'll ask permission from a client to replicate that design for us to keep as part of our display, because we have to show the work. You know, that's the other problem, is how do you actually put this work in front of people so people have the chance to respond to it.
So who is Anthony?
Michael. So, you know, Michael Cravatta.
Yes.
Right. Well, Michael's middle name is Anthony. And when we were redesigning our name, he at that point was thinking that he would change his last name to Michael Anthony, and so it made sense to go Anthony Jamieson. It was his studio. He started the studio. I was his apprentice, and so, you know, nod to Michael first, me second. But it also really kind of worked, sort of like with you know. It has a nice name. It has a nice feel to it.
Yes.
And it has a feeling of professionalism. You know, it's something. A friend of mine was an expert in branding, and she said that the name we had before was horrible. And so thinking about just, you know, what is it you're trying to create here? You're trying to create, you know, a feeling, an image of something solid and you know, artistic. And so Anthony Jamieson sort of had that feeling.
And it's also kind of moving.
Yeah,
Right? It has some movement
it has
to
a
it.
definite flow to it, which I
Yeah.
really like. So that means that I've had to learn how to answer to Anthony a lot. I get a lot of emails addressed to Anthony. I get a lot of phone calls asking for Anthony, and I have to, explain that Anthony is my business partner. His last name, but I can help you.
And then AJ.
Well, AJ. So when Michael's retired now, and this is not a one-person operation. You need at least 2 people to operate, and so consequently, when I was looking for somebody to try to come into this, AJ is the daughter of one of my diving buddies, and she was living in Vancouver. On the North Shore. She'd been working for the last 10 years or so as a groundskeeper in a golf course. She has an art background. She's a painter. She's actually an interdisciplinary artist. Sculptress, a painter, puppet maker, mask maker, and so because she had that interdisciplinary background, I was interested. And she was ready for a change. She was ready to, and that change meant coming to Main Island, and setting some roots down on Main Island. And so she's been with me now for 3 years. And of course, part of that change was, I have a little fun with this because, our studio is called Anthony Jamieson Design Studios, which, for short we do AJDS. So I say that part of my succession planning was looking for somebody with the initials AJ, so that I didn't have to change.
Kind of worked out.
Yeah, kind of worked out, exactly. So, I don't know if when I retire, AJ wants to take this over or not. I would hope that she does, but, when you spend so much time building something, you don't really want to just let it go. But if that's what happens, that's what happens.
Thank you, Bill, for joining me today on After Hours.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Absolutely.
And thank you for joining us. And thank you to the Main Inn for letting us use this space.